So hello everyone. As I say, I'm Kate from the Soil Association, and the Soil Association is a UK food and farming charity, and we focus a lot on organic farming practice, and we've got our own organic farming certification body. So we're one of the partners, obviously, in the FABulous Farmers project, and we've particularly been focusing on mixed crops as one of our fab measures that we've been delivering, and within that diverse herbal leys are the ones that we've been focusing on particularly. And there's been some really good interest from our farmers in the UK in adopting herbal leys, and a lot of sort of desire to find out more and to do some experimenting and to do some implementation, both in livestock systems, but also in arable systems. So I've been learning a lot along the way over the last year or so, and I would just want to share a little bit of that with you and talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing. So I know there's going to be a real diversity of expertise, as we've seen from the Mentimeter in the audience today. So I'll go over a little bit of an introduction in terms of the value of herbal leys, which I'm sure a lot of you may be familiar with, but then also talk a bit about the establishment, because we've sort of been finding that is a little bit of a challenge and perhaps a bit of a barrier to adoption, because farmers are concerned about whether they can get suitable establishment. And looking at some of the questions that came in ahead of the meeting today, there was quite a few about establishment, particularly establishment without ploughing. So I'll see if I can talk a little bit about that. And then I've got a couple of case studies just to chat to you about of two of our southwest of England dairy farmers who've been sort of embracing herbal leys in a big way, and just sort of share a little bit of what they've been up to. So I shall get going. So for those of you who aren't aware, in terms of a mixed crop, so multi-species leys or diverse herbal leys is what they're called. They're composed of grasses, legumes and herbs, or forbs, and you really are looking at a complex mix of species, which can be anything from 3 up to 30 species. But really, we're looking at sort of a minimum of kind of 6 diverse species in order to get the range of functions that you want from having a mix of different plants within your grazing sward. And you can see from the photo there on the left that you've got this mix of grasses, and then you can see some of the herbs coming through and the legumes, and getting that distribution of the different species is obviously really, really key. And so having this diversity of species enables you to get multiple benefits. And when you're thinking about the benefits that you want from having one of these multi-species swards, that then makes you start to think about what species you might want in that mix, because you've got this range of benefits from different plants performing different functions. And so to kick things off, and very much in line with the sort of the aims of FABulous Farmers and the reduction of nitrogen fertilizer inputs, is their ability, when you include legumes into the mix, so some examples I've included there, to build fertility, so that you're able to build fertility and maintain and feed the ley through the plants that you've included in this mix, and that you don't need additional fertilizer to be added. And there's quite a lot of research going on in the UK at the moment that's really demonstrating that these herbal leys can perform against a ryegrass ley with fertilizer in terms of forage dry matter production and also growth rates on livestock. So you can get that growth and you can get that production, but you're not having to have that external input of nitrogen. They will obviously benefit from having some manure applied, but that's just a top up. So in addition to the fertility building, then another real big benefit, which we're really feeling in the UK, and I'm sure you are in other parts of Europe, is being able to have a forage crop that's really resilient to dry periods of weather. And as we just mentioned, you know, we're going through a real dry spell at the moment, and have done in the last few springs particularly. And the nature of these herbal ley species, a lot of them have very, very deep roots. And this enables them to bring up moisture from deep in the soil, and so still put on good growth in periods of dry rainfall, in poor rainfall. But also importantly, these deep roots are really breaking up the soil structure. So they're then allowing other plants that perhaps aren't quite so deep rooting to put down greater root depth and be able to bring up more moisture. Additionally, these deep rooting species are able to lock carbon much deeper into the soil, which then also reduces the release of that carbon if it's locked down deep. But really, this sort of real drought tolerance, ability to really provide forage in periods of dry weather is one of the really big benefits of having these diverse species in your ley. Alongside with that, because we seem to be getting these extreme periods of weather, so they've been very successful on heavy land. Because you've got this massive root system going on, it can sort of act as a sponge in the soil and help absorb, you know, moisture and heavy rainfall. Additionally, going back to these lovely deep roots, they're breaking up your soil structure, and they're reducing compaction and improving infiltration within your soil profile, improving drainage. So generally, you're getting much better flow through your soil in periods of high rain, so less risks of then getting waterlogging and poaching and the like. Equally, I know some of the farmers I've found, this real spongy root matter that you get then protects the soil, so that, you know, if you've got cattle walking on it, they've got this ability to sort of, you know, bounce on this sponge, and so then not cause poaching in the same way. Additionally, these leys have performed well in terms of persistence, and you know, again, down to the range of species that you might select. You want to be picking certain species that will be persistent in the sward. But as I'll touch on in a little while, something that obviously farmers have been concerned about is investing in these leys, getting this lovely array of species, and then the fear that, you know, you're going to lose them over time, and how are you going to get them the variety and the complexity in that mix to persist. And a lot of that really is down to how you graze it and how you manage it going forward. But a lot of the species that we've been looking at are very persistent. And then you've got other species that perform anthelmintic benefits. So due to their high tannin content, they can reduce worm burdens in livestock, which is obviously very beneficial. So examples there being chicory, particularly sainfoin, bird's-foot trefoil. They've all demonstrated having high tannin and good anthelmintic properties. Additionally, and I've spoken to a number of vets about this, the way often that you manage herbal leys in these sort of long rotational systems is equally beneficial for reducing worm burdens, because the way that the livestock are grazing means they're not getting down deep to the soil. They're keeping quite a good residual length of forage, and therefore that soil contact means you've got a reduced risk of picking up worm burden. So lastly, just to mention about high mineral content. So a number of these plants, and some work that Rothamsted Research Institute in the UK did looking at the mineral content of a number of these plants, and demonstrated that some of the herbs, so plantain, chicory, yarrow, had very high but good levels of selenium and iodine minerals. And additionally, legumes like bird's foot trefoil and Alsike clover had good levels of copper, cobalt, zinc and iron. So by having these this diversity of herbs in your mix, of legumes in your mix, you're able to get this, you know, high mineral content, highly nutritious diet. Equally, when you've got problems with soils locking up minerals in the soil profile, going back to my deep roots, they're able to, you know, get back in deep into the soil and hopefully be able to mine more minerals up from deeper in that soil profile. So really, so much good that they can do. It's hard to consider why you wouldn't want to adopt these multi-species leys. And particularly when it comes to soil and soil benefits. And that is key when you're thinking about if you're going to introduce one of these leys into a rotation with arable crops, and equally if you're, you know, having it as part of your grazing platform. Because really overall improvements to soil structure is immense because of these deep rooting species, the organic matter levels that you can bring, by having, again, a lot will be down to how you manage the sward, but the diversity of species and the root matter that you form improves organic matter levels. All that root matter is then feeding your soil microbes, increasing that activity, improving nitrogen, nutrient cycling in your soil, and again, back to that resilience from those deep roots. And improving drought tolerance. So in terms of soil benefits, if you're able to get one of these multi-species leys into your arable rotation, you can then, you know, put all that hard work into improving your soil to then reap the benefits in the arable crops that follow. And also, obviously, if you can graze them additionally, you're then getting the benefits of the, you know, the fertilizer and the manure that those livestock are putting in, but also getting additional value of that as a forage crop. So to keep going, I'll keep going on my roots because I think it's so important. And this is a slide that I've borrowed from the lovely people at Cotswold Seeds who have, you know, spend a lot of time working with farmers introducing herbal leys. And just to illustrate, you can see on the right you've got the ryegrass, the picture of the ryegrass with the relatively shallow root depth, and then looking across at some of the other species, so the sweet clover and the sainfoin and the lucerne, in particularly the chicory and the ribgrass plantain, and you can really see the massive contrast of how those species are able to put down that amount of root into the soil. And you can, you know, think about all of the benefits that that has, as I've just mentioned. And this again, I've borrowed kindly from Cotswold Seeds, but it demonstrates. So on the left, you've got some chicory, and then following along, you've got some burnet, some sweet clover. I think there's another little clover next to it, red clover next to it, and then where the screwdriver is, you've got some ryegrass there. And this picture was taken after the herbal ley was sown in a pretty dry spring, and this was after 4 to 5 weeks of growth. So just in that short period, you can see the amount of root structure that's been put on. And so, you know, you can only appreciate the benefit of that in terms of how quickly your sward can get away and how quickly it can be performing all those brilliant soil improvement activities that, you know, we've really been wanting it to do. So just lastly, just to touch a little bit on species selection and soil type. And there's, you know, I'm sure there's lots of people out there who have a lot of experience in this, but just to really demonstrate that when you're thinking about introducing herbal leys, you do want to think about your soil type and where your pH levels and what species are going to do well, because the more you can be slightly selective, obviously, about the species you put into the mix, the more likely you're going to get the results that you want. And you don't particularly want to invest in expensive seed of certain species if you know they're just not going to do well on your soil. But you can see from the all soil types in the middle, you know, there's lots of good opportunity in terms of the types of legumes you can use and herbs that you can use. And then if you're on a lighter sort of alkaline soil, then you've got different opportunities to if you're on a heavy soil. So it's just obviously when you're thinking about introducing these mixes into onto your farm, obviously consult with whoever you're buying the seed from in terms of what your soil type and what species will be best. And there is more and more resource out there through a range of different projects. There's certainly a lot going on in the UK in terms of helping farmers make the right choices when it comes to seed selection. So moving on to establishment, and I think I guess to start off with, the biggest thing you need to think about is planning. And when I thought about saying that, I then thought, well, you need to plan, but then you also need to be slightly opportunistic, because obviously things change in terms of the weather and what is the most suitable time to put your lay in to get the best results. So it's a bit of a combination of planning and then grasping the opportunity. However, if you're thinking about doing a reseed, you need to be thinking about then how that's going to fit into your rotation. If you've obviously putting it within arable rotation, you need to think about what your windows are for planting, in order to get the best success in terms of timings of sowing. And then if you're thinking about trying to establish or oversow a lay into an existing sort of pasture, then it's being slightly opportunistic about can you take advantage of damage to that lay. So if you've gone through a period of poaching through the winter, or if you've got gone through a period of drought and livestock have taken the pasture down very short, and so you've already opened it up, you've already given good damage to that sward, knocked it right back. So it means that potentially with some additional cultivation, some harrowing, you'll then be able to get lots of good access to obviously bare ground, which is what you need. Then you're going to have more success with overseeding. But so the combination of timing is critical, but then looking for these opportunities. And with the species mix, so if you're doing a sort of full reseed where you're going to be establishing, a really fine seed bed, then you've obviously got more opportunity to put in some of these, very fine seeds, and you might want to grasp a much bigger mix. Whereas if you're doing an overseeding, particularly into an existing sward, you might want to think about sort of being a bit more selective and going for sort of a robust 6 species of, perhaps some chicory, some plantain, so some white clover, some of these more robust species that are going to be able to compete against the grasses. So that's something to consider. So when you're thinking about preparing the seedbed or working it into an existing lay, then sowing time is obviously very important. These species need warm soil, so they really want a soil temperature of 8 to 10 degrees to germinate. And so when you're thinking about sowing sort of now in the spring is good, although we've been having in the UK these very cold nights, which is not ideal, or later on in the autumn, so sort of August, September, when you've got good warm soil. But you do also need that moisture. And I know we've been finding farmers these last few years who've been finding crops have failed in the spring because it's been so dry, unfortunately, and we've just had these periods and they've just not been able to get that moisture at the right time to get the germination, and have actually had more success in autumn in terms of sowing. But the key thing is about warm soil and needing that soil moisture. And then when it comes to sowing method, so the best opportunity really for the greatest success is to get the best, finest seedbed. However, there has been demonstration through some of the projects in the UK, the TOMS project, for example, that tillage depth didn't actually have a huge impact on growth, overall dry matter yield. It was more dependent to the type of soil that you had and the finest of the seabed and the soil contact that you were able to establish, rather than overall soil depth. But being able to establish, you know, a good fine tilth is obviously going to be ideal, because you're working with small seeds. And then when it comes to sowing, it's really critical that you don't sow too deep. So ideally, broadcasting is the best approach, and then to roll afterwards in order to get that really good soil contact. But if you are going to drill, then you really got to make sure that you're not drilling any deeper than a centimetre, you know, 10 mil deep, because otherwise you will just lose these seeds, you know, too deep in the soil, and they won't have an opportunity to come through and germinate. So you've really got to be careful that it's really, really shallow if you are drilling. In terms of direct sowing or under sowing, you'll see in the case study I was going to talk about in a minute, farmers are having success under sowing under arable crops or under other arable forage crops, because often it can help with weeds. But also equally, you know, direct sowing is been successful. So there's opportunities to do both, and that will obviously be key in terms of your timing. Just trying to think about. But the main things to think about are really to have that warm soil, to get the soil contact, and to think about sowing depth. So those are real critical things when you're trying to establish these leys. And think about, you know, the timing and the planning that you've got within your rotation, and the opportunities that you have. Just lastly, thinking about weed control, because obviously there's an issue when you're working with a diverse ley that you can't use a herbicide because you've got the mix of grasses and broadleaves in that mix. So there's no real opportunity to control broadleaf weeds, for example. And so really you need to think about what the dominant species are in your field. So when you're considering your weed ecology, have you got a lot of autumn germinating weed species? Have you got a lot of spring germinating weed species? Similar to how you would consider, say, your arable cropping rotation, and thinking about, you know, sowing at the opposite end of where your weeds are coming, because you just don't have that opportunity really with the herbicides. But the key thing will be is to try and select optimum times so that you get good establishment straight away, and so that you've got the plants that you want filling out that space, and you haven't got too many gaps where the weeds can come in. But yeah, certainly weed control obviously is something to consider. And then managing post-establishment, you do really need to be able to protect those seedlings early on, so that they can establish their root structure. And if you have done an overseed, and if you're working on stitching into a already existing pasture, then you can let the livestock in to graze for sort of 4 or 5 days in order to keep that grass back, knock that grass back. But obviously, as soon as you start getting any seedlings germinating, then they need to come out, otherwise they're going to do real damage. So that's something also to think about. Sorry, I'm just conscious of time, but just to touch slightly on the grazing, because one of the key things that we found with these herbal leys is they really do respond well to rotational grazing, high stocking rate rotational grazing. And I've stolen this slide from Sarah Morgan at Rothamsted, who's been doing a lot of work on this kind of cell grazing approach, so a mob grazing or a rotational grazing approach, where you've basically got high stocking densities and then you're moving livestock on rapidly, because this enables them to graze in a non-selective fashion, and you can get a clean sward on a small area, you can then move that stock on. And then the key thing with these herbal leys is they seem to really respond well to then having a long rotation, so having a really nice long recovery period where you've got at least 20 to 30 days of regrowth, so that you get lots of good green leaf on those plants in order to do all the photosynthesizing that they need to do to build that root structure that you really want. So you have that opportunity in that regrowth period. And then also, in order to maintain the diversity, having these really long recovery periods seems to be really important to be able to maintain that species diversity. A key thing also when you're grazing them is not to overgraze. Really want to leave a minimum of 7 to 10 centimeters of residual, and you want to be really careful not to overgraze. And I think we found that these rotational grazing systems enable you to, hopefully, if you've got obviously enough of a grazing platform to be working with, to not overgraze and to be moving cattle along rapidly. Otherwise they're going to select out all the yummy bits they like, and will mean that those plants get damaged and don't regrow as you'd like. So but there's it's a complex world in terms of management, but this grazing approach afterwards, if you can get that right, that does seem to be the crux of how to maintain species diversity going forwards. So I just lastly wanted to talk about two of the farmers that I've been working with. So this is Peter down in the southwest. He's a farm manager of an organic dairy and arable farm, and he over the last couple of years has been sort of expanding the area of herbal leys on his farm, and has really been benefiting a lot from this regrowth in dry weather. These crops have been his real go-to, where he needs some food for the cows in these dry weather periods, and they're able to perform for him. So he's found that to be really beneficial. He's particularly interested, though, in how they're going to be affecting his arable crops following the leys when they've had their period in the rotation. If he's going to be able to have real improvements in arable yield following these herbal leys, and obviously that will repay the additional seed costs. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But just to mention in these two pictures here, so we've got on the left hand side, this was a ley that was sown back in 2018, and it was sown under a pea barley mix in 2018, and then it was cut for a whole crop. And then the picture, the first picture on the left-hand side of it is in September 2019. So you can see you've got, there's a lot of chicory there. You've got a lot of growth there. And then on the right-hand side, that was when I went out and visited last July in 2020. So again, you've got really good mix of species. There's lots of plantain, there's lots of chicory and clovers, a good amount of the legumes and herbs coming through. One thing that he has found probably he would like some more grass, and he was thinking that possibly the undersowing has meant that the grasses don't establish quite as well as we might like, although he has found that beneficial in reducing the weed burden doing the undersowing under a whole crop. He does think that possibly that's impacted on the grass germination. So he was actually considering last year whether he was going to oversow in the autumn with a bit of grass to try and fill it out a little bit with some additional grass, but has been really pleased with how they're performing. And then just quickly, we've been doing some work with Peter and a number of other farmers looking at residual grazing length. So back to what I was talking about in terms of if you leave a longer residual in terms of when the cows come out, they're leaving more grass there. Are you then getting better regrowth and maintaining species diversity more? So we've got a paddock split in two. One half they're grazing down to what would be considered a sort of an average residual length, and then one half they're leaving it longer. And we're looking at how the species diversity maintains. So it'll be interesting to follow that through. And then lastly, I just was going to mention, so there's another farmer I'm working with, dairy farmer in Somerset in southwest England, and he's again started in herbal leys in a smaller way over the last couple of years, and is really now ramping it up across his farm in order to try and manage a combination of sort of poorer, shallow soils that they're suffering with over a limestone brash, so sort of very shallow, dry soils, and then they've got some very heavy soils. So they're hoping that within the dry, sort of shallow soils, these deep rooting plants will, in order, bring up more soil moisture, and they'll be able to build soil organic matter, build soil depth with these plants. And then on the heavier clay soils, they're hoping that the roots again will be able to break up soil structure and loosen up that soil and enable more minerals to be brought up, because they've got some problems with mineral deficiency. So there's a real hope that these species are going to do what they need for improving their soil, but also deliver for the animals in terms of nutritional forage, and also for biodiversity. So they're really keen that you've got these flowering species and plants producing lots of seed for birds and for insects, which is very important to them. So quickly, this is a 7-hectare field that they sowed back in spring 2018, but due to the drought that we had that spring, it then needed to be redrilled in the autumn of 2018. And this is a mix of chicory, plantain, ryegrass and clover. So a pretty simple mix, but still doing a really important job. And then this second picture is when I visited out last year, and this is a 3.5-hectare field that was drilled last spring, so spring 2020, with a more complex mix of 16 different species. You can see it's slightly dominant in chicory that they found. The chicory really did take hold, and they wonder if the percentage of chicory in the overall seed mix was potentially a bit high, but again they're hoping that the grasses will fill out. But you can see some of the burnet in there and the plantain and the different grasses, and they were really pleased with how that took, and that was air drilled and after power harrowing, so being very successful, that field. And then lastly, last autumn, they drilled another 18 hectares, again, of this 16 species mix. And you can see the variety of species coming through there, which has come through very successfully last autumn. And this spring now they're sowing another 14 hectares of that mix. So really embracing getting as much of the farm under these herbal leys as possible, and really hoping that they'll be able to benefit from all of the soil improving benefits that they have. So I think of all the farmers that I've been working with so far, the things that they've been saying is that establishment is the challenging bit. Once you can get them well established, then it's really all up from there in terms of how they perform, and it'll be really interesting to see obviously how they perform for their soil going forwards, and that's something that we'll be looking at. So I think that's all from me for a second.
Hello everyone. My English is not that good as that of Kate, I'm sorry. And also our experience with herbal leys is not that big. We are still beginners with the herbal leys, but we have a lot of experience with clovers, and also a little bit with lucerne. And I want to use that experience also to project that on the herbal leys. First, I want to see in Flanders, like I said, we don't have enough, a lot of experience with herbal leys. I hear from some people that it's starting, as some farmers are starting with it. But we do have subsidy for grass clover. And so as you can see on the graph, it's declining very well, very good. So it's because it's a good subsidy. The farmers like that. It's not that much, but it's easy money. They have to have 20% clover in the seed, and maybe it's a pity they can't do grazing before half of August. So before it was not allowed to do derogation on it. Derogation means that we can put more manure out of animal manure on the field, and it was not combinable with grass clover before, but now since I think 2015 or 16 it is allowed, and you see that's also the success of the crop. As you can see, our grassland is mostly, I think, a temporary grassland where they do it on because of the, yes, it means to have more rotation with maize. You see, it's kind of I think 1/4 of the temporary grassland in Flanders. As I said, yes, it's grass clover and not herbal leys, but maybe we can learn something about what did we learn about the grass clover in the past. We did also we did already a trial, I think 2012 until 2014 with drought-resistant grass mixtures. There was tall fescue in it, but also clover, and the grass mixtures in the trial had 300 nitrogen, a level of 300 kilos nitrogen per hectare, and there where we put clover with it, it was less, and it was, I think, 118 to 200 kilograms nitrogens per hectare. What we saw was that with the tall fescue in the mixture, the yield was decreasing. Yes, was higher. The digestibility was lower, and we know that tall fescue is very yes, rough plant, and also the protein was lower than compared to perennial grass. When we mixed that with clover, we also could have the protein a little bit higher, but the digestibility was lower than grass. And in the rations we use in Flanders, grass is the minor when you compare it to maize. So the protein and the digestibility is very important to yes, to spare some concentrates in the ration. When first they did some trials also at Ilvo, and they saw that after making silage of the mixtures, you saw less the difference in digestibility and in protein content. But when we did all the experiments and we replicated them, it was it stayed the same. So we didn't see any difference between dried samples or silage samples concerning nutritional value. So that was a pity. We also did some trial with the animals in the stable. We did some fodder trial. We put grass clover instead of with a high content of red clover instead of the grass silage in the ration at our farm, and we did really yes, a good experiment with replicates, Latin square experiment. And we couldn't see that the intake of the clover was higher than there where we give grass. It was the opposite. That was not what we expected. And also we saw that the milk production and the milk yield was a little bit less there where we had clover. But in the trial we saw the very variability, and at the end of the trial it was a lot of it was better. So we think we didn't wait long enough to adapt the cows to the clover. Although there was on paper very little difference in nutritional value between the grass and the grass clover. So I think I said farmers get some subsidy to put clover in their grass mixtures. They do it, but mostly they don't adapt their fertilizing. So the advantage of clover is that you can spare some chemical fertilizer. I think sparing or using less manure in Flanders is not an advantage. It's a cost. So we say give the base of the animal manure like you are used to do on your grasslands, but spare, especially in summer, your chemical fertilizer. When it's nitrogen, when it's potassium, you do it like you do it on your grass. But we see that farmers mostly do it the same like their grass, and they give a lot of manure, so they think they don't have to use any potassium anymore out of chemical fertilizer. So we did some trial on practical fields in field trips on that. You see the mixture we used. It was grassland with some timothy, perennial grass, and also white and red clover. It was established well, but afterwards we had two very dry summers and springs. And we kind of saw a little bit also the opposite what we expected. When we see to the yield, and that's the graph in up, we see that the red line mostly is higher than the blue line. That means that the farmers' fertilization, like we named it, was a little bit better when we saw to yield and also to nutritional value. But we saw to the clover content, we saw that not in the beginning year, but afterwards, the blue points are higher than the red ones. So we had a lot better clover content in the grass mixture when we put away, we didn't give some nitrogen out of chemical fertilizer in summer. And we did well give some potassium. Except on the end, it was the opposite. So as you see here, we see the advantages. It was very dry and hot in summer, and you see the clover was higher, and then we saw what we expect, that also the yield is higher. We didn't see that the year before, when also it was very high, very dry. So you see on the overall yields, I think we cannot, we cannot use this trial to pursue the farmers to use less nitrogen, but we still it's depending, I think on the circumstances and the weather, but especially the first year, I think you have to establish your sods, your grass mixture. So maybe we have to say that in first year we have to give a little bit more nitrogen, as we used to say used to advise. That was for the clover. Here it's not a mixture, except the mixture of clover and lucerne. But some years ago, yes, there was a lot of interest in lucerne with the farmers. We are on a sandy soil, and as you know, yes, sandy soil has a low pH, and normally we advise to have red clover instead of lucerne. But a lot of farmers wanted to cultivate lucerne, and we want to see the difference between it on our sandy soils. So we did a comparison also on field trips with whole parcels. We saw in 2016, it was a very wet condition in spring and summer, and we saw that the lucerne was completely disappeared. Instead of the clover, he also had a lot of weeds and open plots, but we could stay and mow it the rest of the year. So we had a kind of a good yield that year, in spite when we compare it to the weather conditions. We did resow the lucerne, and then yes, here you see the young lucerne was a little bit better like the red clover, but we cannot say either that here also with the first year it was a spring sown lucerne and red clover. It was a little bit of better like red clover, but not that much. But when you see only to yield, maybe lucerne is a little bit more better. When we saw to nutritive value, it was very varying. Sometimes red clover was better, sometimes lucerne was better. We also thought that maybe the mixture of the two was better, but we cannot say that out of this trial. But what we also saw that yes, the cutting stage was some point of yes attention that we had to make. The farmers are yes. We also did 5 cuts the last year. Here with the severe conditions in spring, we had only 4 cuts. But mostly farmers have 5-6 cuts. Maybe it's too much for lucerne and alfalfa and red clover. Because of the reserves that we have we have to build up in the woods. So I come at some tips and tricks we learned about the trials, and also the farmers they told us. Some points of attention are that the sowing depth is undeep, much more undeeper than for grass, and we sow it together with grass, so it's not always easy to do it well, especially not in sandy soil where it's very dry, and you want to have also the humidity on your seeds. I think most farmers know it, but some do it wrong. No injection before first cut, and maybe not from second cut, before second cut also, because of the heavy machinery, and also the injection themselves, cutting of the sod. And yeah, like I said, heavy machines, avoid them, especially in wet conditions. But it can in late spring and summer can it be done. It's important, otherwise no farmer in Flanders will use the legumes or the other herbs. I think we have to put some manure on it, otherwise it costs too much. The mowing length is, I think, the thing that is most done not good. Mostly with the triple mowers, the contractors that mow, they mow with a high capacity, but they yes, not scalping, but it's too short mostly of the time. So I think we have to have more attention on the machinery, that there are special adaptations for not mowing too deep at the ground. And then the thing about the cutting stage, the stage when we are taking the cut. I have this. Yes.
Just to know that there's not so much time left. Just to let you know that maybe it's possible you
can. I will very short. Like I said, we have to see at the reserves that are going to the roots, and we have to choose for quality from some cuts, but also for yield, and especially the yield of the next year for other cuts. And we have to see once or two times in a year some purple in the field. And also with the mowing, the loss of leaves is very important. I think it's also with the herbs, but especially for the legumes, they lose leaves when we are tedding too much. So avoid tedding and be careful with that swat. For silage making, yes, there are very high in fibers, so we have to be very prudent when we make bales. And like I said, in the clamp, you have to choose. Yes, it's good. It's homogeneous when you do it together with grass. But when you want to use the special effects in the ration, for instance, protein, maybe it's better when you have some little clamp or some bales where you can choose how much you can give of it. And then maybe also inoculants are good placed to use on these crops. And also the open sod is maybe a disadvantage for the ash content. But I think when it's going about the low sugar, I think herbs can a good addition to take up that. And now I'm going to the herbs. This is not an experiment of ours. It's an experiment of Luxembourg with organic farming. It's I think not so. It's sowed in autumn 2020, and you see the yields of 21 in this graph, and you can see that the mixtures, the grass clover was good, but also some mixture with more, with also the lucerne in it, and also the mixture with the herbs here were not that were good. It was a very dry summer, so we at Hooibeekhoeve also did some the same experiment, but we couldn't sow in the autumn of 2020, and we waited until spring, and it was severe drought on it, and you see it here. This was our best example, our best object. We had a lot of weeds, and maybe you see it not on this, but we had weeds. We couldn't rid of them with mowing, so we had to stop the experiment. We did again some seeding, but now on our fields, not anymore organic. We did so in autumn 22, and here you can see our mixtures. They are very varying about type. There is one with a lot of herbs, the pure grays in it. They are commercial mixtures. We want to see what the yield and the quality will be with mowing conditions, mowing management. And I have some photographs. We don't have results, but I have some photographs of March and yesterday of it's the object with most of the herbs in it. And yes, yes, you can see the field. It's also a photograph of yesterday. So we are expecting that we are learning with this field a lot about the herbal mixtures, and especially the under mowing conditions, because most of the farmers in our regions are not grazing but are mowing a year round. So I thank you for your attention.
Then thank you, and hello and welcome everybody. My name is Gilles Altmann and I'm an agricultural advisor and researcher at the Institute for Organic Agriculture in Luxembourg. And there we work together with mainly organic, but also a lot with conventional farms. And today I will tell you about some kind of mixtures of forage legumes, mainly which we used in a field trial in Luxembourg, established last end of the year. And some mixtures we also use in our advisory job on the farms. So I have prepared a presentation mainly based on an existing presentation which was created by David Richard, another researcher and developer at our institute. And much of the things I wanted to tell about have also been told yet. So I try to be very short about it. So as I said, I mainly based the variety mixtures I will present on a trial we have established at the end of last year. And it's a project supported and financed by the Luxembourgish government and the Ministry of Agriculture. And the motivation for such a variety trial for feed forage is that we need, or we think that we need some more sustainable farms, not only in Luxembourg, but also in the whole of Europe. And as we all know, and it has been told before, field forage has a beneficial impact on soil, but also on plants, on the whole crop rotation, and of course on our dairy animals. The cultivation of pluriannual mixed forage legumes constitutes the basis of natural soil fertility. As we all know, legumes are able to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. And this, of course, is an important source for nitrogen and proteins in our cattle production. Well, grasses in our mixtures contribute to the accumulation of carbon in the soil. After tillage of the field fodder, the humus formed due to decomposition of mainly grass roots is the main source of nutrients for the subsequent crops. And it's the basis of the formation of clay humus complexes, which improve soil structure and therefore also water balance. Regular cutting for a period of 3 to 4 years enables a very good regulation of weeds, and the diversification of the crop rotation by using herbal leys also is able to reduce and regulate pests. We see that there is a need to adapt field forage to increasingly difficult climatic conditions for more sustainable food production or fodder production. And it is important to ensure production and quality management, especially during droughts in summer, as we have seen for the last couple of years. There is also a kind of uncertainty of establishment of these fodder mixtures. And new sowings not always established very good. And there is also some challenge regarding the persistence of these forage mixtures. And we see that as crucial challenges for the future. And we hope that such a field trial will help finding solutions for the future. The aim of field fodder cultivation, of course, is the successful production of high quality forage, but also in sufficient quantity. And the most important factor for the success of forage production is the right choice of the mixture to be sown. On one hand, the choice should be made on the basis of the local pedoclimatic conditions. So you should always have a look on where exactly you are farming, what soil do you have, what climate you have, what weather conditions, and then use this informations for the use of your mixture. Yeah, of course, you have to look how you use the mixtures. So do you primarily mow them, or do you graze with cattle, or do you use them for both? So there are differences between the mixtures and their adaptation to it. In addition, the chosen species and cultivars should always fit together in order to ensure a good coexistence and a good complementarity between the varieties and species. Yeah, as we have seen in the past and in the practical establishment, which can help for good weed control and for a better and less risky establishment, is the sowing under rye at the end of the year. And this supports a good start of the ley, and can help regulate weeds by a first cut of the whole crop in spring, and then the under sowing can have a good start. And the rye in whole provides a good microclimate under which the grasses and herbs and legumes can establish in a good way. So, of course, as has been told before, the success for the production is the species diversity of the mixtures. It allows a better resilience towards climatic stress, weed infestation and usage intensity, and it ensures a compact closed turf. When a species or cultivar is becoming less dominant, it can be easily replaced by the other species in the mixture, and this then prevents the establishment of weeds and ensures a productive crop. Legumes integrated, such as red and white clover or alfalfa, are the lifeblood of the mix, and they are able to supply enough nitrogen for the growth of the grasses. As also has been told in the presentation before, fertilization with nitrogen is not recommended because this always weakens the legumes. So legumes fix nitrogen only if there is if there is a low level of nitrogen in the soil. If we give nitrogen from outside by giving fertilizer, then legumes are no longer interested, as I would say, to fix nitrogen themselves. And so the aim we are looking forward to by using legumes is not given anymore. So legumes additionally provide fodder with large amounts of high quality proteins. We can say that red clover provides high levels of rumen crude proteins, so they can be used very good by cattle, but only in the first 3 to 4 years, I would say. And then progressively, red clover is replaced by white clover. White clover or meadowgrass are able to quickly cover bare soil after, let's say, drought periods or hard winters. And legumes also play an important role in stabilizing the mixture, especially when we have very dry conditions. And there we can especially name alfalfa, which is very good in it. Also fundamental is the diversity of grasses. Presence of upper grasses as tall fescue or timothy grass, or lower grasses such as perennial ryegrass is fundamental to obtain a good and balanced yield over several years. Different cycles of early, medium and late perennial grasses in one and the same mix enable a continuous production and a high energy density. Then there has also been told about including herbs in the mixtures. This is a very good opportunity to stabilize the mix, especially in dry conditions. Species like plantain or chicory are able to produce biomass and cover the soil in dry periods, and they also increase the palatability when using as fodder for the cattle, so they eat more of it. Yeah, I'll give you an overview of the varieties or the mixtures we are using in our field trial, which is only one little part of very diverse mixtures you can buy on the market. So we try to integrate some different mixtures containing all these types of grasses and legumes and the herbs, which I was telling you about before. So first mixture we have integrated is a mixture which is putting an accent on tall growing upper grasses, and it has a balanced content of low grasses, and this especially fits for mowing. So this is less usable for grazing. So you see already the difference between the mixtures and where you have to look which usage you want to have. So do you want to mow or do you want to graze? So this is a very important point where you have to look at when you choose a mixture. Well, most of the mixtures we have integrated in our field trial are very good adapted to dry conditions, especially in summer. So you see alfalfa used and red clover, and especially alfalfa enables the establishment on rather heterogeneous and dry fields because it has a very deep rooting system and can reach groundwater easily, so it provides water for the whole crop. And in general, the integrated legumes, as told before, provide protein-rich fodder. Yeah, mixing partners complement each other in terms of competitive strengths and endurance, and so we reach a constant stand composition, which is very long lasting. Yeah, we can say that Festuloium and tall fescue are also high yielding grasses, and they are very drought tolerant, and they also have a high forage value. We can also name cocksfoot, which is also very deep rooting, and this can also contribute to a very drought tolerant mixture. So we can already say that we see that this is very a challenge for the future, to see that we have mixtures that can compete with drought situations, so that once established, the mixture is long lasting, so that, as told before, invest in cost and work to establish can be compensated by long-lasting use. Yeah, then we also have chosen, as we call, national quality mixture. This is more grass-rich, but it also integrates some legume with red clover, and this also gives some kind of drought tolerance and is a very good protein source. And I think that we can say that this is mostly the kind of mixtures used on the farms. So rather grass, rather based on grasses and less on legumes. And so we could advise that a more diverse mixture containing some legumes and more different grass types is more fitting for future challenges. So then we have another mixture which should be more flexible, so it can be used for as well. Sorry. intensive mowing and grazing. Sorry, 1 minute, please. So this mixture is used for a very good fitting for different types of locations. It provides very good yields and qualities, even under more difficult conditions. And herbs integrated, as we see, chicory and plantain should stabilize the mixture, and this especially during drought. And forage, chicory, and whipwort in general have a very positive effect on palatability and eating by the cattle. So in addition, we have a special mixture which we have established at IBLA, and this is simply to combine all different kinds of positive aspects of the grasses and the legumes, and this is tried to be combined in one mixture. So this is mostly the kind of mixture we use when advising farms. So we try to have very large diverse mixtures which are very resilient towards different climatic conditions, so that there is a good resilience and a good use over several years. So another point which is very important is that farmers have to look at which type of cattle they have on the farm. So the right choice of the mixture is very depending on the type of cattle. So there is a difference between dairy cattle and suckler cows or meat cattle concerning their needs for energy and protein. And so here, just to show two different types of mixtures which have been used by farmers in Luxembourg. So for dairy cattle, a little higher red clover content than for suckler cows because of the high protein content and the energy, and some differences between the content of grasses. Then focusing on meat cattle, there is also a very diverse mixture composing when looking at different farms. So practical experience of farmers can lead to very diverse and different mixtures. So on the left side, you can see a mixture used by a farmer in the north of Luxembourg, which contains very low red clover and very diverse with other species of legumes, for example, white clover or yellow clover, and also Swedish clover, and then a little bit of hone clover, and some different kinds of German ryegrasses and Timothy grass. And then on the right side, rather different, more high content of red clover in the southeast of Luxembourg, a little less diverse in legumes and a little less diverse in grass types. So this mixture is more adapted to rather dry conditions. As we see, there is also coxfoot integrated. So in general here, the farmer tries to have a very good drought resistance and a composition that is adapted to his use. So that's it for my part.